No. I think we're live, coming to you live from the Andy Potts Racing headquarters here in Colorado Springs. I'm Andy Potts. I'm sitting here with Coach Mike Doan, and we, as usual, have difficulties with the technology involved with Google Hangouts, and I apologize for being a little late. I have not once have I ever not had technical difficulties with a Google Hangout. It's borderline amusing if it's not so frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. But we're here, we're live, and we wanted to go over with you some of the questions that you had. So talking about some of our methodologies and some of the training philosophies that we have. So Mike here is going to help you, but I want to also introduce Mike with a more professional introduction and give you a little bit of his accolades so you know exactly who Mike is. So Mike has been my head coach, Mike Doan, since 2004, and he's coached my complete program, so swimming, biking, and running, and we've had a real nice run. This is year 13 for us, right? And Mike is also the head coach for Colorado Springs swim team. He was a college coach at the University of Wyoming. He's had 2 Olympians, and he's had numerous All-Americans, a national high school record holder, 3 national high school record holders. I'm going to let him kind of whisper to me some of his accolades, so he's not sitting here going tooting his own horn. I can toot his for him, and he doesn't have to. So right now we are 32 years into CSST? 20.
I've been with CSST for 28 years. 28
years with CSST. He has been the head coach. And CSST as a swim team, Colorado Springs swim team, is a USAT bronze levelist, bronze level program. And he's also coached a bunch of other triathletes, some professional, some amateur, before we jumped in on this venture of Andy Potts Racing. So is that about some?
Yeah,
he's also USA Triathlon Coach of the Year. There you go.
I first met Andy in 2002 when I was the USA Triathlon resident swimming coach.
That's right.
And we bonded quickly because Andy's background was swimming and mine was swimming as well. I won't bore you with what I've done or not done in the sport, but I've been a swimming coach for 45 years. I'm not a young man. And so just on that time alone, that amount of time alone, I've learned a few things. I've made mistakes, but I've had success as well. And any coach who is telling you the truth will tell you the same thing. So with that said, we'll just fire away, and
all right, so
we'll go from there.
One of my first questions is, so a lot of people, this isn't the only thing that they're doing, like myself. Triathlon is my career and my job, so I can devote any hour of the day towards it. When you're talking to a professional who has a job, a family, and is pursuing the sport of triathlon, they have limited hours, right? So a lot of the people in AP racing are able to commit 11 to 15 hours a week. And why have you weighted some activities more than others? And can you describe the breakdown on how much you are emphasizing swimming, biking versus running?
Well, first, and I'm assuming most of you have real jobs, unlike Mr. Potts here, and And so when I've worked with age groupers over the years, I've always said life first. Take care of your life. Make sure your family, you're putting the time into your family that you need to do, because it's easy to just all of a sudden go off the rails and start putting way too much time into it. So that's the first point. Second thing, in terms of how do we decide where to throw the most emphasis to? You've probably seen that a lot of our emphasis is on the bike. There's tremendous carryover from your bike training to running. It's great for cardiovascular, and that can even translate a little bit into your swimming. But with that said, you need to address weaknesses, strengths, and parcel out your time. Just because we put together a plan doesn't mean you can't tweak it and modify it on your own. In fact, that's part of our mantra, is to take ownership in what you're doing, understand the cause-effect relationship in the training stimulus, and then help us help you in terms of, hey, I think I'm getting the bike dialed in. I need to start adding more run, for example. So.
All right, so one of the major questions that I field is when I publish some of my heart rate racing data, it's, the people are kind of surprised at how powerful I can be at a lower heart rate in relation to sometimes their heart rate. Can you go through the heart rate zones when we're specifying the work for each person? What is a zone, and can you kind of put some the objective values of the zones, and can you put some subjective words to go along with them? Or maybe you do the objective part, and then I'll do subjectively how I describe the zone. So when we say zone 1, we mean?
Zone 1 is just easy warm-up effort. And that's about it. If you see a 10 or 15 point heart rate jump during your warm-up, you're probably warming up too much or warming up at too high of a level. So from start to finish of your warm-up, you may look for an 8 to 10 point jump in heart rate. And that doesn't seem like much, but that's what a warm-up is. You're just getting the parts moving and getting blood flowing, basically. Yep.
So for me, what zone 1 is it's warm up. Get the legs moving, the arms moving. If it's swimming, start to tap into a little bit of the breathing. Just get ready for what's to come. And then the other time I hit zone 1 is in the last stages of cool down. Otherwise, we're not really spending too much time in zone 1 other than warm up and the last stages of cool down. Otherwise, it's time to get to work, and that leads us to zone 2.
Zone 2 is where you, for example, in Andy's training, and I've done some math here, but he'll spend 40% of his training time in zone 2. And for Andy, that's a heart rate range from the high end of warm-up up to 125-ish. So we're talking, a 20-point jump, and we do a lot of time in zone 2. It's a very, you're definitely beginning to put some work in, and there is value in that, a lot of value, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
So when I spend time in zone 2, it's time to dial in and focus on the task at hand, which is working out and improving. Whether that's a certain skill set for the day, certain objectives for the day, I really start to focus on the task at hand and really try to dial in what it is I'm trying to achieve that day. I spend a fair amount of time in zone 2, specifically because it is like it's a preset or a heightened warm-up where, yeah, I do sweat, and yes, it can be demanding, mostly because of just the extended time you can spend in zone 2, if you're concentrating properly, then you're getting a lot done mechanically, as well as developing some of the I don't know if you want to call it latent or just real base level heart and lung strengthening.
Okay.
So zone 3.
Okay, zone 3 is where Andy is spending 25+% of his time, and that's really where we see the most training effect taking place. That's where, when we're in the midst of hard training, if we're out for a long tempo run, for example, Andy's running, sub 6 minute pace, 550 plus or minus. That's zone 3. And for Andy, again, that's on my math here, 126 to 142. So it's kind of a wide range, but when he's getting up into the low 140s, definitely getting some real work in. And we try to spend, it depends on the day, but we're spending a good 25% of our time in that area.
Yeah. So when you combine zone 2 and zone 3, that's the bulk of my work as a training triathlete professional. So zone 3 I describe as no fun zone. Lots of concentration is required. Basically, you go from intermittent conversation level to no more talking. You got to focus, and breathing gets a little heavier. But it's a pace and a rhythm and a breathing level that the more efficient you get, you just become stronger and stronger. You're able to push the same watts at a lower heart rate. You're able to run faster at a lower heart rate. And zone 3 work translates on race day to how I race. So most of my time is zone 3 and zone 2. So I don't spend a ton of time in zone 4, but how would you describe zone 4?
Just jumping on what Andy just said about as your efficiency improves, your pace actually gets better at a lower heart rate possibly, mm-hmm. and that means you're adapting to the training load, and we pay very close attention to that. That is one of the critical elements in our training. As Andy's coach, I pay very close attention to when he's adapting to training, because otherwise we're just going to stay in one particular place too long and he's going to get stale. So when you see adaptation, just tweak it slightly and create a little more resistance, for lack of a better word, and then the next phase of your training is adapting to that training load. And if you do it right, it's subtle, you hardly feel it, but all of a sudden 5, 6, 7 weeks into your training, you're going, wow, I have made significant improvements, and I really I didn't even notice that I was making these improvements. And that's the fun way, or that's the fun thing about training like this. It's just, there are so many things you can look at and pay attention to that give you positive feedback. We call our training feedback, but one of the things we're looking for is positive feedback. Like, am I improving? If you do it right, yes, you're going to improve.
Yes. So I wanted to kind of piggyback on that when we talk about adaptation and efficiency. Those are the two things in the feedback loop that prevent you from plateauing and kind of just reaching a certain fitness and then staying there. That's also the primary reason why I'm getting better every year. And it's a little bit surprising just because we're all getting older every day, but I continue to improve because we train, wait for adaptation, the efficiency improves, then we tweak it just a little bit, like Mike said, and then all of a sudden it's, hey, here's a new level, a whole new level of fun. whole new level of pain.
A good way to look at this is just once you've been doing this for several weeks, just look back into your training log, 10 weeks back, and you'll notice that your pace has improved, and most likely your heart rate has dropped a little bit, and that is a great. It's just a great way to look at your training. Like I'm improving. Because that's what keeps you getting out of bed and wanting to train is, am I really improving or am I just kind of treading water? So that's a critical thing, very important.
So next level, zone 4.
Zone 4, percentage-wise, maybe 20%, if that much. And that's when we're doing, for example, track reps. We do, during the summer, once a week, we'll go out on the track. When we're starting to think about Kona, for example, we'll start at maybe 6K worth of track work and work toward 10 or 12K week by week. And we're doing 3 and 4 minute reps, heart rate's up there. But for example, we might do 6 1200s, 1200 meter runs. And with a prescribed heart rate, and the amount of rest we're taking between each rep is driven by the amount of time it takes Andy's heart rate to drop 15 points. That's just an arbitrary number that we came up with. It's not really arbitrary. It's a good trigger point for Andy, not for everyone. So, for example, if he's running 5:20 mile pace and his heart rate early in the summer is taking 40 seconds to get back to 135 or whatever our trigger is, as time goes on, that amount of recovery is going to reduce. So instead of taking 40 seconds, when Andy's in great shape, he's getting this unbelievable quick heart rate drop from 150 to 135 in maybe 25, 28 seconds. That's another signal that he's adapted to the training, and we just keep moving from that point forward. So again, only 20% of our time, if that much. I'm not even sure if it's that much, but not a lot of time in that area.
And so if zone 4 isn't a ton of time, the words I use to describe zone 4 is high intensity training, and it's the type of training that you need to have rest built into the workout because otherwise it's unsustainable. So it's a interval or a rep type workout where you need the recovery so you can get your heart rate back up and get the turnover and the power required to get your heart rate that high. So I do spend some time in zone 4. It is valuable, but I spend more time in 3 than 4 for sure. And the more time I spend in zone 4, the more breakdown that happens. It's not necessarily the next day or 2 or 3 days later. There's a little bit of a delay in the intensity that hits me maybe a week later, and it makes it very hard to sustain for a long period of time. And then there is a zone 5. I don't ever see it, but it's there. It exists. Zone 5?
It's there. It's when the lights are going out.
Right.
Something that's worth mentioning here is we think in terms of work to rest ratio, and that's a very important element in our training. For example, when Andy's running reps on the track, the work to rest might be say 6 to 1, 6 parts of work to 1 part of rest. Or sort of, if he's, for example, running a 3-minute rep, let's say doing 800s in 3 minutes, just as a number. 3 minutes of work, and then the rest would be approximately 30 seconds. Even when he's doing a long, sustained ride, we're building a lot of work to rest into that. He might be hitting some hard reps and then we let off the gas a little bit, heart rate drops. That's his active rest, but it's still rest. And so when I'm just writing up his training, I'm always thinking in terms of work to rest.
Work to rest on a bike is still pedaling. And on the run, sometimes it's jogging through it, and sometimes you're stopping. So it's kind of, you have to understand, like, work to rest isn't necessarily like shut it all down and stop moving. Sometimes it is when it's on the track, but most of the time it's, you are recovering, but you're still moving and flushing, especially on the bike. So
we talk about how these translate.
Yeah, so when we talk about heart rate zones, there's a little bit of a pyramid effect that, it's basically the pedestal that it sits on is 1, then there's zone 2, the time you're spending in it, zone 3, zone 4, and then zone 5, how little of the time you spend in zone 5. So it has a pyramid effect, and it translates really well to my racing. So the percentage of time that I spend in a race at certain zones are...
It's inverse to what he's doing with his training. Ironically, he spends 40% of his time in zone 2 training. When he's racing, running the numbers, he's only there 2% of the time. Zone 4, for example, we spend 20% of our training time there. During a race, he's spending over 50% of his time there. So you go, well, how does that work? If you don't train 50% of your time in zone 4, how can you possibly race in zone 4? And that's just that's what we have learned about Andy, and I think it's true with most everyone. If you approach a race and you rest if you rest and take the beat down out of your legs, it's amazing how much more power and energy you can produce by training like this. And we've been operating with this principle since day one. When I took over Andy's training, I said, this is what I believe. I've seen it work in swimming, and it's going to work on the bike and the run as well. And so it has. And training smart, by that I mean a lot of zone 2 and zone 3 time, you can train every day at that level. If you do collapse, it's because you've overdone it. But what we're looking for is sustained days and weeks of training, and if we do it right on race day, you can just flip the pyramid over and it's time to race.
Yep.
I'll give you an example real quick. We coach a young lady who made the Olympic trials in the 800-meter free, and just a few weeks ago, and to make that time, she had to hold 106 per 100-meter pace. I would imagine that only 2 or 3% of her training is actually at that pace. A lot of her training time was spent at 110, 111, 112 pace. But again, just paying close attention to her, I knew that on race day she could hit the numbers that she needed to, and she did, albeit 0.3 of a second. We'll take it. But she made her time.
All right, so we've gone over the training zones, the time spent in them. How do you establish your training zones so you kind of know the parameters with which your 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are? How would you suggest that they establish their personal training zones?
Good question. One way to do it, and I don't do it this way, is basing everything off of your max heart rate. I think what I'm more interested in is your race max heart rate. Heart rate. What are you doing when you're racing really hard? Where's your heart rate? And then we work backwards from there. You can do simple field tests like 20, 30-minute runs, and the prescription might be warm up and go out and run 20 minutes as hard as you can and sustain it, or 30 minutes as hard as you can sustained. And then your average heart rate for that is in my mind, that's zone 4, zone 5, and then you just work backwards from there. And that's the simple way. Again, I don't believe in max heart rate. Like, go out and run as hard as you can for a half mile until you feel like you're just going to crawl off the track. That doesn't tell me a whole lot.
Especially when the name of the game in a triathlon is, your day could be anywhere between an hour to 17 hours.
Yep.
So, a 2-minute effort may not be that great to determine your zones. I will say this: when we were establishing my zones, and what we do, and we establish it every year, basically every race, is we go out and we capture what's required on race day to perform, and then I go and I produce on race day, and we capture the data, and then we look at it and say, okay, this is how much time you're spending here in 4, how much you're spending in 5, how much you're spending in zone 3, zone 2, and then we calculate it and we kind of flip the pyramid upside down to support the effort required on race day. And that's what the core premise is how do we support what's required on race day? And to support it, you need to build a foundation. And the foundation is built in zone 2 and zone 3. You don't reverse engineer a foundation with zone 4 and 5 work because it leaves a foundation weak, ready to crumble, because it's unsustainable, right? It can't support it. So zone 2 and zone 3 are your strong foundation.
Yeah, zones 2 and 3 are very much connected. There's a lot of back and forth between those two zones, and the same thing with zones 3 and 4. There's a lot of back and forth between those two zones in training. And don't get technical, just we can give you some percentages to go off of, like if my race max or if my field test said I'm running 730 mile pace and my heart rate was 155, then that's what I'm going to call your race max, and most likely if you're able to sustain it for 20 or 30 minutes, that is your zone 4, and then you work backwards from there. Zone 5 is just these short, intense bursts that you may have as a training load, you may have in a race when you got 2 minutes to go and you're just throwing it down trying to get to the line. So.
All right. So that's our rundown on zones and how to apply them to how to think about them objectively, subjectively, how my brain works with it, how Mike's brain works, how we put it together, and yeah, it's really about building a solid foundation here. I do have some quick one-hitters that I want to address before we sign off. And the first one is stretch cords. How do we use stretch cords for strength? Last night there was a stretch cord set at workout. I usually do stretch cords 2 to 3 times a week, and I kind of I set up a base level or base distance where there's no slack in the cord, and then I'll do maybe 30 seconds easy, 30 seconds hard, and by hard that is I just increase my tempo. Sometimes I take 1 or 2 giant steps back, and that increases the tension on the cord. So mix it up. A good set would be, you have to build up shoulder and strength and core strength for it. So set it up as a build. So right now I'm doing about 2.5 to 3 minutes worth of cord work, and eventually hopefully it'll build to about 5 to 6 minutes worth of cord work.
I really believe in stretch cord work. I think I'm old school, but we do, my young kids, my high school kids on my club team, we'll do stretch cords 4 or 5 times a week, and we have a goal of maybe doing 1,000 reps a week. Different exercises. We isolate, the catch part of the stroke, the finish, working triceps. We do something I call fly squats, where you're doing a butterfly pull, just as if you were pulling fly, and at the same time you're pulling back, you're dropping down into a squat, and so we're taxing about every single muscle you can get to. So you're doing squats with resistance, you're doing fly pulls. We do a thing where I have the kids stand up on their tiptoes. They have to balance themselves, and they're just doing tricep extenders out the back end of their stroke. So a lot of different things, but it does yield results.
Yep. Question number 2, how do I make my transitions faster? Key here is clean. Clean is fast, and clean keeps it simple. So I don't clutter my transition area, only have in it what I need. I used to practice in my hotel room or at home, but it's not really a great place to practice because your heart rate's really low, and it's totally different when you're jumping out of the water and you're going into a sprint into your bike. Your heart rate is kind of in your mouth, and it's really hard to kind of snap a chin strap when you're heaving and hoeing. So I just think, know your equipment, and just the pure repetitions of it should simplify it. The more often you do it, the more you get comfortable with it, and try to take deep breaths. Keep it clean.
I do think you can practice transitions, and there's an old adage in swimming is that you need to learn how to swim slow before you can learn how to swim fast. So I would suggest just walk through your transitions. Just take your time and break them down into 3 or 4 components, and get it to where on race day that panic is out of the equation. You've walked through it several times. You know exactly step 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, you're on your bike and you're gone, or you're off the bike and you're onto the run. So slow practice outdoors. Just run through the bike to run transition 5 or 10 times. It takes a minute or less. Just doing it slow, and it becomes programmed into your head that this is what I need to do. I just need to speed it up a little bit now.
So I guess that hotel time did pay off.
It did.
All right.
It pays off on an Ironman, doesn't it?
Right. Next question is, how will my focus on short course nationals this year translate to 70.3 racing? Well, Olympic distance and short course racing really supports 70.3 racing nicely. There's not a ton of a difference between the power I put out for Olympic distance versus a half Ironman. The difference is just the amount of time I'm doing it. So I think that you'll hopefully be pleasantly surprised with the power you have, and then it's just a matter of working on the sustainability of that power. So some of my best short course race or 70.3 races have come the weekend after an Olympic distance race.
Yeah, just get comfortable with the amount of time you're going to be spending on the bike. If you're doing a half Ironman, you're going to be looking at a 2.5, 3.5 hour ride. So be comfortable with that. Like go out and do some rides of that length, just so you've got saddle time and all your saddle sores have dried up and gone away.
There you go. All right, suggestions for recovery with a busy race schedule. So busy race schedules, you have to race for a reason, have a reason for the race, and fun can be a big part of that. Hanging out with friends, being social. But I also like to perform well on race day. So my keys to recovery are making sure I get enough protein after the race. So what you're looking for is 20 grams of protein within the 30 to 60 minute window, and 20 grams is your threshold on that one. So protein right after the race or any hard effort, and then I wear CEP compression socks, get the venous blood flow returning back to my heart, so it kind of reoxygenates my blood. More fresh oxygen gets to my muscles to help the repair process. So. And you had mentioned that you have some complex and said on the recovery setting, complex can certainly help with that, and I have that as well. Any suggestions for recovery, real quick?
I think there's nothing better than a good swim
Oh, yeah,
as well.
and a good swim.
If you can swim after a race, that's a great thing. Even if it's getting in for 10 minutes and just slopping around, I think that swimming is therapeutic. And then in the 2 or 3 days going forward, if you do anything, or if you only have time to do one thing, swim.
Yeah, I would advocate swimming and biking, and holding off on the running just because of the pounding. One thing I do after Ironman races is the next day I'm not super motivated to move, but I force my wife to say, you have to make me swim, even though I'm going to probably say no, I don't want to. The second day after an Ironman, if I'd swum the day after, I feel a world better. So you just get a bunch of circulatory benefits when you go swim without the pounding.
I think the bottom line is keep moving.
Yep.
During your recovery.
All right, and one of the last final questions is, will Michigan win the Rose Bowl this year? Yes, they will, because we've got Jim Harbaugh, and Michigan's back.
Okay. A couple more.
That's it. That's all we got. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed the Hangout. Hopefully it was informative. Hit us up with your questions, and we'll hopefully address them in the next Hangout. Have a great day. Good luck training. Best of luck at the races, and I hope to see you soon.
So long, guys.
So signing off.